Hello everyone, it's Dark here with another video for you guys comparing Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft, and in this video we're going to be going over how my experience has been tanking in Final Fantasy XIV in comparison to World of Warcraft as a paladin. I do want to emphasize on that point because I have not tried the different classes in Final Fantasy that much to be able to say anything about it. And with my paladin, I just want to mention that I've gone all the way to the end of Heavensward, which I think it's the first expansion or the second one. So my experience has been only up to that point, so there's no end game experience yet. So the first thing I can say, which showed itself a lot when I was tanking, is the combat is much more slower in Final Fantasy, and it's definitely noticeable when you play it from World of Warcraft. It's just the time in between each attacks and between each ability that you use. It's very noticeable, and it kind of threw me off a lot, so it's something that you need to get used to. I personally prefer the combat in World of Warcraft more than Final Fantasy XIV. I like the faster pace. I like that it can use abilities much faster without like a wait time in between while the GCD is recharging. But I guess it's a different play style. But I feel it's a bit annoying when, you know, there's like a bunch of mobs that are getting pulled, but you just use an ability and you have to wait a bit until you can use the second one. I find that a bit frustrating. There are abilities that you can use. So for example, there are abilities that you can use which are off the GCD, but they have a cooldown of usually like 30 seconds. I mean, in case of a paladin, there are 30 seconds or 20 seconds cooldown on them. So if you're in a fight and you need to react quickly and those abilities are on cooldown, it's extremely hard to do anything other than like wait, and it can be painful at times. Whereas in World of Warcraft, I mean, I'm gonna compare it to the same class. So if I play a paladin in World of Warcraft, you're pressing a lot of abilities and it's very rare that you're actually sitting without hitting anything. So I think World of Warcraft is a bit more spammier with abilities. You know, for example, Avenger Shield, it keeps resetting. You know, your hammers you can spam. Then you have your Judgment comes off of cooldown, and then the GCD between abilities is much shorter than Final Fantasy. So the combat is, I would say, it's much more fluid. And it would be noticeable. So if you're a veteran WoW player, you will notice it when you play Final Fantasy. And it has gotten better as you level up and get more abilities, but it's still there. Like, I still feel it when I'm tanking. Next, I want to talk about the dungeons themselves. One major difference I found between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy is that the dungeons in Final Fantasy have much less adds in the dungeons. So usually when you pull a pack, there's only 3 mobs or at most 4 mobs. I've rarely had scenarios where, like, you know, there's more than that, unless you try to pull a bunch of groups together. But then again, the distance between the groups is so much that, like, you're running a bit until you get to the next pack, until you have, like, you know, 8 or 9 mobs grouped together. In World of Warcraft, the dungeons are a bit different. There's much more mobs and adds that you can pull, and I think it makes it a bit more exciting to pull like these big packs and do this huge AoE as a tank and as the DPS doing it. I find it's a bit more engaging as a tank as well, because you're holding aggro on all the different adds and mobs. Whereas in Final Fantasy, it's a bit more slower, less mobs to pull. So that's one difference I noticed. The second difference is the adds in Final Fantasy have more mechanics usually than World of Warcraft. I mean, that's something I noticed. Like, they do a lot of things that you need to dodge. It's not like if you don't dodge, you'll wipe, but they do a lot of damage. So there's not that much mechanics with adds in World of Warcraft. Like, every now and then in some dungeons, there are some mechanics involved. But in Final Fantasy, I found it's much more common where there are mechanics that you can dodge out of damage that you can avoid and dance around. And I personally enjoy it a lot because it kind of takes away the brain dead tanking where you just go pull, do some damage, and just stand there, or you can just jump around for fun, but it's not necessary. Whereas in Final Fantasy, you need to be on your toes and dodge those mechanics. Again, I don't think you wipe if you don't dodge them, but you do take a good amount of damage. The last part is the actual bosses in the dungeons. And in this part, I would say that both of them are pretty good at it until now. They are different. The feel is different, definitely. But the fights for both of them are pretty interesting. What Final Fantasy does is they do have music associated with specifically each boss, and especially the last boss of a dungeon, which makes it quite epic. It gives it a good feeling. But with regards to tanking mechanics, they are both pretty similar. There isn't a difference that I would say is significant. I found both of them to be quite fun. So if you enjoy tanking, there are some really fun fights in Final Fantasy XIV with regards to dungeons. One thing Final Fantasy XIV does a lot is there's a lot of cool dodge mechanics with the bosses, which I enjoyed a lot. Like, there's a lot of stuff you have to dodge. It's not just like one ability. There's like, all these different indicators that show, and you have to just dodge and hop between them. And you can see that in the fight in the background. I do want to put this fight for you guys at the end so you can watch the whole thing, because it's really cool. Like, when I actually did that fight and we got to the end, I had a rush and it was a good feeling. So I think you guys would enjoy it if you are a WoW player. Make sure to watch it. And that's just like a regular dungeon. It's not like a end game dungeon or anything. It's one of those dungeons you encounter when actually leveling in Final Fantasy XIV. One thing that Final Fantasy XIV has that just doesn't exist in World of Warcraft is that they have these, I don't know what to call them, like, they're not dungeons, but they're called actual trials, where you sign up for, and when you actually go into these trials, you're at the boss. Like, there is no ads, there's nothing. It's just this one boss that you have to kill, and those can be very fun as well. They have their own unique mechanics, and the one you can see in the screen is you can see how cool the graphics is. The music is pretty awesome. And this specific boss has this mechanic where it does this huge amount of damage, and if the tank is not healed up to full when the mechanic happens, you just straight up die. We actually wiped, I think, 3 times on this boss before we killed it, and I think the main reason was the tanks wouldn't get topped off, and even when they didn't get topped off, the other tank was not taunting. So obviously we weren't on voice, and a lot of people seem to be new to that boss. It was my first time as well, but you can see it's a cool fight. Like, the graphics are cool and it feels good to actually do the fights, and there's just no equivalent in World of Warcraft, right? You don't have anything like it where there are just these difficult boss fights. I mean, it has different difficulties, but they're just boss fights. You queue up and you go into the boss fight, and it's pretty fun. I like it a lot. I can't say much about raids yet. I've only done 2 or 3, and it's not enough to be able to say if it's good or not, so I'm going to wait off on that one. And with regards to endgame content, again, I'll wait to see if I can give any good input, and I can't really talk about all the tanks until I've actually tried them, so keep an eye out for those videos when they come out. Thanks for watching. I do want to mention that if you want to learn how to tank, I did make a comprehensive guide on how to tank, and even though the examples that I'm using is related to World of Warcraft, the same principles apply to Final Fantasy XIV. It's a complete beginner's guide. I'll leave a link in the description, so if you want to learn to tank, take a look and maybe it'll help you. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy these videos, make sure to subscribe. Peace.
Darkness shall consume light. Your light shall burn no more.
Know your place.
Mortal scum!
You have meddled enough. Chaos shall reign forever. You'll not defeat me again. Defies all reason.